The League of Women Voters of Cape Ann is pleased to bring you a forum with the two candidates for Mayor of Gloucester. The League is a nonpartisan organization which encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government. One way we do this is by presenting candidates directly to you, the voters, in a fair and unbiased format. The League does not endorse any candidates for public office. The city election is Tuesday, November 7th. Early voting is underway at City Hall from 8:30 to 4 Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesdays. On Thursday, it will continue until 6:30 p.m., but on Friday, it will stop at 12:30 p.m. I'm June Michaels, a Rockport League member. The two candidates are Gloucester's current mayor, Greg Verga, in his first term after serving 6 years on the city council and 8 years on the school committee. He has a degree in communications from Salem State College and championed improving public awareness of the workings of city government. As mayor, he is focused on improving the city's infrastructure, especially schools, roads, and Stage Fort Park. He's a founding member of the Gloucester Fishermen Athletic Association and serves on other boards dedicating to serving Gloucester's youth. Mary Ellen Rose, who has a doctorate in health education, is the former Gloucester Health Director. She has degrees from Southern Methodist, Baylor, and American University, and has developed public health initiatives for public, private, academic, military, government, and nonprofit organizations from the community to the global level. So, question number 1. In 2021, the legislature passed a law requiring 175 cities and towns with MBTA stations, including Gloucester, to establish a zoning district which multifamily housing is permitted as a right, that is, without needing any variances or permits. The city's planning department is working on mapping a transit-oriented district that would bring Gloucester into compliance with this new law, and the City Council will then need to vote to adopt any zoning or ordinance changes that result from their plan. Question is, what do you think is the best plan for bringing the city's zoning into compliance at both the downtown and the West Gloucester MBTA stations? And I'll start with Mary Ellen Rose.
Well, thank you for having me here, first of all. I think one of the best plan is the plan that will fit the community, the desires of the community. In West Gloucester, if one were to look at that area, there's not a lot of space around the actual train station, and we are, it's a very hard area to develop. So I'd be curious to see what the options are for developing around the MBTA in West Gloucester. When it comes to downtown, I know there's been an outcry of overdevelopment, and we're experiencing some of the burdens of the extra traffic, and that's with just our tourism without bringing in a lot more housing. How to actually address the zoning issue would, I guess, come into play. What is allowed? I know that it's right by right, I believe, is single and dual homes, and they want to expand that. But a lot of it depends on what the homeowners are willing to do. If we're looking to expand homes to put family members in, as opposed to developers coming in and purchasing homes and then turning them into Airbnbs, then I think that zoning would be appropriate. But I'd like to see zoning that actually provides housing for the citizens of Gloucester who need it, that are here and are looking for opportunities to purchase and rent homes that they can afford.
And Greg?
Okay, well, give a little background. So the 3A law, which I'm on record saying I don't think is a great idea. I don't think one size fits all. However, it is a law, 3A law. The Attorney General in March or May put out a memo basically clarifying that 3A is not an option. Some cities and towns and a lot of people locally have indicated that it is an option. The Attorney General made it very clear that this is not something that cities and towns can pick or choose. We have to comply. Originally, it was 3 grant opportunities a city or town might miss out on if they don't comply with the law. Since then, it's up to 13. That was as of May with the memo. We could also be on the hook if we don't comply. to be find ourselves in court over civilly for fair housing issues. We are in interim compliance because I submitted an application online to the Commonwealth at the end of last year. So we're in interim compliance. We have till the end of next year, 2024, December 31st, to be in full compliance. Interesting to hear the answer that we just heard, because Maryl's on record saying she's going to not comply with the law. We will find ourselves in a pickle if we do that. The best way to reach compliance is through the Comprehensive Planning Initiative, which we have kicked off, basically the new master plan. We need to hear from the people to see what is in line with our vision for Gloucester for the next 10 years, how that vision can align with the requirements of 3A, and sort of overlay those, and that's what we can submit to the Commonwealth. In the end, we have to reach compliance. There's no way around it. One of the obvious issues here we have currently is certain downtown districts, you could have a one-family home, tear down your house and build a two-family by right. You could have an empty piece of land, build a two-family by right. But if you have a one-family home, you can't build a second unit by right. And this is something that people who have elderly parents or might have older children, they might want to build that second unit for them. In the case of my father, he did just that when my sister was widowed and had a toddler. He built a second unit to get her back on her feet, knowing that in the future he could use it as rental income. That's exactly what he did. So 3A is something we've got to comply with, but it has to be done with the public's input, and we go forward with that.
So at present, the main MBTA station in downtown, is that immediate area zoned for just commercial or a mix of commercial and residential?
It's mixed use, because you see the example at the condominiums above, across from the Rum Line. They have the Seaside Graphics, mm-hmm. and upstairs are condos. And then across the street, you have apartments above some of those buildings. So it is mixed use. They've, in the recent updates to the guidelines for the 3A, they have added that we can factor in some of the mixed use properties. But the concept, by the math, it would result in 2,270 additional units that could potentially be built. It is a mandate to zone. It is not a mandate to build. We've heard some crazy things like the state is going to make us build housing on Burnham's Field. There is zero discussion about that. The state has not mentioned that they're going to require that, nor would we allow them. We'd go kicking and screaming if they're going to take more of our open space for that. We have a mandate to zone, not a mandate to build.
Now, Mayoral, how much of Gloucester is zoned as single family as opposed to duplexes and multifamily?
I have no idea. I think there are definitive benefits to coming into this role, having spent a long time on city council and in the school committee, and Greg displays that, and I appreciate that. I also appreciate the fact that this is a long-standing issue with zoning and the complexity that comes with it. His comment about my being on record that I am not in favor of this mandate is correct. I am not in favor of it, and I don't believe that it's I do believe that it's a challengeable mandate. When we talk about the grants that we could possibly lose out on, those are grants that you have to apply for and you have to receive. So using the carrot and stick approach to comply with mandates from the state or federal government without actually asserting what is best for a community, I think is an example of just rolling over instead of standing up for what's right for a community.
Well, you've anticipated my next question, which was about the punitive aspect of this law. Failure to comply would make Gloucester ineligible for grants such as Mass Works, Housing Choice, local capital projects funds, like the $3 million the city received for the Trask Street utility project, or even payments to support Gloucester Housing Authority. Can you explain to the voters the importance of some of these grants and what failure to get them would involve? Greg?
Well, the last one you mentioned, the Housing Authority, that is not a threat. That is something that's been delivered on by the state. So in the first pass of the 3A law, there were 5 communities that chose not to get to interim compliance. those 5 communities saw a cut of 10% to their housing authorities. Our housing authority, the director forwarded an email to me he had received earlier in this year, basically saying if your community does not comply, you too will see a cut. So this is absolutely a stick. There's no question about it. But one way to get there is to have the relationships, which I have with our lieutenant governor and our governor. We had the governor at a MMA mayor's meeting last month in Everett, and I asked her point blank about this. As the administration need to do a better job of explaining this, because there are some people out there who really believe this is an option, even in spite of the Attorney General's memo. And I said, and we also need a little more carrot and a lot less stick. But the point is, those grants you mentioned are from that first draft. We're up to 13. There's 10 additional grants. I don't know what they are yet, but we do use a lot of those grants. We can't just find the money elsewhere. This is money that helps us deliver on improvements that we cannot find room in the general fund, and we just don't want to go out and borrow for every little thing. Trash Street is the perfect example of a lot of work that was done for the pipes under the ground and the roads and the sidewalks that would not necessarily have been done without some of these grant opportunities.
So Mary Ellen, some other grants that I mentioned are community planning grants, Massachusetts Downtown Initiative, Rural and Small Town Development, Brownfields Redevelopment. Could you talk about what you would do if we were not eligible for these grants?
Sure. I think that the chasing of grants is an overrated pursuit, and I think what is wonderful to make sure everyone understands is that being in bed with the political establishment is a double-edged sword. You play the game well, and when you do, you're rewarded. And when you don't, you are punished sometimes, and that's just how it goes. The citizens of this town are paying dearly for some of the grants that supposedly we've received that should help the population, but do they ever really help the population? We've received $12 million in a settlement fund for the fishermen, and yet our fishing industry continued to decline. We've received grants for reducing drug substance use in this city, and yet we have no data to prove if that's been effective. We've received grants for health initiatives, which we had no data. So there are a lot of things that we get grants for, and there's not a lot of reporting as to exactly how that grant money is spent and how it impacts the end user. And until I have better information about that, I can't say I am terribly disappointed that we won't have some of these grants that we are chasing. That's not to say I'm not completely in favor of going after grants. We do need external money. We obviously can't depend on the population here to support every initiative that this city undertakes. However, I do think that perhaps if we didn't have the reliance on those external grants, we might be a little tighter with our money and how we spend it. We may be more reasonable as to the things that we build and the extent to which we build them.
Now, the states...
Since you said this would be a conversation, I'd like to respond. So chasing grants, I don't see it that way. We work on projects, and it's not just me. This goes back throughout history. The city looks at what's in the best interest. What should we... What do we need? What are our needs? What's going to help us move forward? And then we say, now how are we going to pay for it? Well, let's see what grants are available. So we don't go chasing the grant to build the project. We designed the project, or conceptually come up with the project, and then seek the grants to do it. Being in bed with the establishment, okay, I'm not going to talk about that one. I think that having a collaborative relationship with the powers that be upstream is not a bad thing for any city or town to have. The grants that came through for the fishing industry, and yet the fishing industry is still in decline, that has nothing to do with the grants. What that grant program did is help create a permit bank, which kept the fishermen in business. It's the continual cuts on the quotas from the federal government that have caused the decline in the business. As far as the settlement, presumably for the opioid money, that just started to flow in last year, and not a huge chunk of it. I think what we'll get over the next few years, the next 15 years, is a couple $100,000. We've been putting it towards our community impact unit, which provides school resource officers, and we are going to be coming up with a plan for how it can work with our nonprofit partners that do work for people who have issues with opioids. So I would just like to say it's not a reliance on grants. It's a matter of we look for what we need to do in the city and then ways we can pay for it. And having those relationships is not a minus, no matter how you slice it.
No, I don't think, and I do want to address that because I don't think, I think that there's a little bit of a misperception about not having relationships. You obviously need to have relationships with your state and federal government in order to get things done. The difference is, do you comply without questioning everything? We have legal services for a reason. They are meant to defend our city against things that are not in our best interest. So no, you don't just say yes to every demand that comes down the pike. I mean, that can be seen not just in Gloucester, but across this country. If everybody bowed down every time a new mandate came across the federal or state government, I think we'd all be in a lot more trouble. There are some things that are simply not reasonable for a certain community. The grants that you're talking about, the opioid settlement fund, is not the only grant. And in reference to that specifically, I love the community impact unit. I thought it was fantastic. However, none of that money was actually, ironically enough, settled within the health department, which is the department that oversees the health of this community. So I think it's interesting the way grant money gets distributed, and I had a firsthand look at that. And I can assure you, I don't know where you stand as mayor, but as a director in charge of the distribution of those grants, I can tell you they were poorly managed.
Well, you were there for about 5 months. We have a department that is running very smoothly, and our grants, the Community Impact Unit does great work. We are, as I said, looking to bring in other nonprofits that could use this money and working collaboratively. I don't think starting off with a finger in the eye to the administration up at Beacon Hill is necessarily the best way to get things going. And I do not agree that this is a mandate that we're rolling over for. It is a mandate, and we are going to comply. And as I said, I talked directly to the governor and told her what my concerns were, as did many of the other mayors in that room. So we are not all like overjoyed. I said it, I don't think 3A is an awesome thing. I don't think one size fits all. But we are going to find a way to comply that meets the needs of the state and is within the values of the city. And that's through the Comprehensive Planning Initiative. And I'm going to keep punting to that because it is not my decision. It's the decision of the thousands of people who I hope will participate in this process over the next several months.
Yeah. One more thought before we move on to the next question. Other than the carrot and stick method, which the state uses, how would you propose that the state enforce municipal mandates? Mary Ellen?
I propose that the state actually sit down with the leadership of a city and understand what its limitations are and what its responsibilities are to that city. Complying with the budgets that are available, the monies that are available to actually comply, the reasonableness of the mandate. There are lobbying efforts everywhere that are going to sit down with the state government and feed them their side of a story and what works best. I think that the city fails to listen to the community and what its needs are and what its desires are to see what's best in actuality. We've been a city for 400 years. We've had ebbs and flows of populations, and yet the cry consistently has been from this community that this will not work, and yet that cry has been ignored. And we've had, from this administration over and over again, oh, there's, false news out there, and there's a very aggressive attempt to quiet the voices of any dissent. And I think that's unfortunate. When you can't hear both sides of the story, you can't make a wise and informed decision, and that's all there is to that. But I do want to address, though, because Greg brought it up on my 5 months at the health department, and while it was extremely brief, it was incredibly enlightening. So I do want to thank you for that opportunity to have 5 months in a position for which I was extremely well qualified for and did an excellent job while I was there.
Okay, Greg, what would you do other than the carrot and stick method if you were the state government?
Well, I think it is communicating. It's when you have existing relationships with cities and towns, that's a great way to go. You can sticker all you want, but the carrot and stick approach, what else is there? They have to say, here's what we think we should do. Here's how we can work with you. These are what might be the bad things if you don't do it. These are the good things that might happen. As far as the state government goes, we are the state government. We put them in power. We have a state delegation too. So it's working through our legislature if we want to see change. So I think that we are on the right track. We can't make this decision in a vacuum. I would also take exception with the fact that we're looking to quiet the voices. That is not at all the case. I've said to one person who emailed me about the lack of transparency, and my response was, because you don't agree with the decision does not mean we're not being transparent. People will constantly say that we are not letting their voices be heard. I'm sure that some people honestly feel that way. But about the fake news, I don't use that phrase. But when people say things like, we're going to build on Burnham's Field, we're going to sell Dogtown, that is indeed fake news and misinformation. I would like to have discussions with people where we're both on, we can disagree with the issues, but I can't disagree with fact and fiction. There's a distinction. There's no way to go from that point.
Thank you. Affordable housing is not just about zoning. The problem is determining what is affordable and to whom it is affordable. According to Housing for All Gloucester, the average annual rent for a studio or one-bedroom apartment is $22,800. The average for a 2 or 3 bedroom is $30,000. A quarter of Gloucester renters spend over 50% of their income on housing. The 2022 median sale price for a single-family home was $653,000, an increase of 45% since 2017. Yet Gloucester's average annual income for an individual is $64,000 or $83,000 for a household. How do you make housing truly affordable and accessible to half the population of the city that really needs it? Mary Ellen?
It's a challenge. It's a challenge not just for this city, but all over this country. There are areas that are building houses specifically for service workers that I know that one of our major employers in this city is doing that very same thing. He's purchased a large building and is putting his workers in there and making it affordable. I've had several property owners say to me, I want to keep the rent low, but between all the increases in taxes and the expenses to live here, it's just very difficult to keep it that way. I don't know what we can do to change that. I've been talking to different property owners to see if we can come up with some ideas. I think that's part of the entire idea of community engagement, is asking the property owners, how can we help you keep those rents low? How can we help you to incentivize not selling your property off as an Airbnb, bringing in short-term renters, building facilities ourselves, taking, let's say, a private entity like the nursing home that's next to the hospital, and instead of having the city buy it for another, I have no idea what kind of building, turning it into affordable housing, using some of our assets that way, or purchasing assets to actually provide housing that will be deed restricted, that can't be turned around and sold within 10 years at a large gain. I think that would help. It's a challenge. I mean, these are all questions that, as an individual, I would be remiss and irresponsible to think that I could come up with the answers. I think that there are people far brighter than me, far more involved in these areas than me, and those are the people that I would surround myself with. I think that to think that you can address anything singly is an arrogant misstatement of your abilities.
Greg?
That's one statement I guess we can agree on. If this were solvable, if this were an easy solution, it would have been solved years ago. But I have surrounded myself with people who know what they're doing. The Affordable Housing Trust, when I took office, was down to just a few members, couldn't even have a quorum. I rebuilt that committee with people who really know what they're doing. It's got a background in real estate, got a background in affordable housing, banking, all the right components. We've also funded it. They haven't had any funds to work with for years. We have the short-term rental tax, which is, we'll segue to short-term rentals in a second. It was promised to be earmarked for the Affordable Housing Trust. It hadn't happened. When I first took office, we put $55,000 roughly into there from the previous year. This year, we put in $65,000. We put in $1.5 million of the ARPA COVID relief money in there. There are already conversations about buildings around town. I can't talk about details because it's sort of negotiations in the background, and having the pre-existing relationships with some of our nonprofits who specialize in this. We've been having those conversations, and we, the city, stand ready to help either provide city-owned land that's not being utilized or funds that might help them, nonprofit, purchase a place. I said during my last campaign, I was committed to finding city-owned land that we could spin off as affordable housing. We've located a spot. We presented it, like the early steps. We had Habitat for Humanity came in, put forward a proposal to build 10 units, basically 5 duplexes, all deed restricted affordable housing. I believe that's 60% AMI, which is much lower than what the federal government is typically looking for. And we have a lot of work to do to make that one happen. But we have the components in place to start chipping away at this for deed restricted affordable housing. The other thing, too, going back to 3A, is we have a shortage. There is a supply and demand issue right now. Less houses for sale, less apartments for rent mean higher rent and higher sale prices. So if we can allow people to start building additional units, just more of them on the market will, by virtue of that, lower the prices. I'm not talking like we're going from $700,000 to $400,000 overnight, but we can't sit back and do nothing and just have hope. And we have to actually lean into it and think creatively to find some solutions. There is no silver bullet here that's going to solve this overnight.
I do think that this is a much more complex issue than a simple supply and demand issue. And what concerns me most is our affordable housing and our low-income housing that we do have, that is funded, evidently well-funded at this point, is some of the most atrocious housing that we have in the city. I don't know if you've ever been inside any of them, but they're barely livable conditions, and it's embarrassing that within Gloucester we have housing that we are responsible for, and yet people are living in atrocious conditions. So my feeling is we should take care of what we have, and instead of I don't know, I'm teaming with nonprofits to purchase housing. I would just love to know how that's going to work and why it would be more beneficial than to just build it and own it as a city and control it as a city, as opposed to allowing another organization to control the future of our housing.
I could answer that question because we are not landlords. We are not builders. And the Gloucester Housing Authority, I'm not passing the buck to the Gloucester Housing Authority, but the city of Gloucester does not oversee the Gloucester Housing Authority nor their buildings. I think to say they're deplorable is a bit of a stretch. And I would say that partnering with nonprofits with deed restricting housing achieves the goal without us having to step in and put somebody in from DPW as the maintenance man and put someone from community development as the overseer of collecting rents or whatever else. That's how it works. It's the partnership. We should not be entering areas we are not experts in. We can provide space, i.e. land, and we can provide funding. That's the extent of it, because ultimately, in the end, it achieves the goal of affordable, deed-restricted housing. As I said, it's not overnight. And this is just little bits to pick away at it. We've got a long way to go.
Well, I'd like to ask both of you, what group of people in Gloucester would you prioritize as being most in need of affordable housing? The people who are homeless, the people who are currently in affordable housing, the senior citizens, the workers, city workers. Who is the group that you would prioritize as for your next housing project? Greg?
Well, it's not our project. So in the case of the one that's underway, the old YMCA, that is for senior citizens, affordable housing that will have a preference for Gloucester. As far as the project they want to work on above the community impact unit, right now is, for all intents and purposes, a rooming house. They want to make that a more studio apartments. And the people who were homeless or close to homelessness were the ones who had priority, who are currently in there. And once they finish the project, they'll be the ones to go back there. Again, we have a need for housing for our people, people who work, making a decent living. Talk about the median income that's qualifies you for these affordable housing rates. You don't have to be at poverty level if you're making $70,000 or more. But that's our teachers, our firefighters, our police officers, restaurant workers. So the priority is each one serves a different purpose. You've got, as I mentioned, that Y project, that's for the people who are at homelessness. You've got the senior housing opportunities, the WISE project, the one that's being proposed down near the east end of Main Street, another housing authority project, and the city just trying to find other ways for affordable housing with an AMI that works for people who actually work here. One thing we're doing now, and I'm going to give credit where it's due, Tony Gross reached out to Seth Moulton's, Congressman Seth Moulton's office, to talk about how we could get Gloucester out of the greater Boston area's AMI. We actually have a Zoom meeting scheduled with Congressman Moulton and people from HUD next week to talk about this. It's a long process, but other cities and towns have actually achieved it. So that would help us quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
As I say, incremental improvements, incremental steps to try to get towards the ultimate goal.
My priority is the working people of Gloucester, finding housing for them so that they continue to work and live in the home that they've created here. That is my priority. When you collaborate in whatever capacity with outside organizations, they have the authority to then dictate what type of housing you can provide and who can get rooms in that housing. While the YMCA does have evidently a Gloucester, this is the first I'm hearing it, where Gloucester residents will have a priority. I'm curious as to how many of those units will go to Gloucester residents. I think that by encouraging outside organizations or whatever organizations that have the ability to dictate who goes into those properties is an error, because I want to see people that live in Gloucester and that are working and trying to stay in Gloucester have housing in Gloucester.
All right, the harbor plan. The Municipal Harbor Plan and Designated Port Area Master Plan was approved in December 2014, and it's up for review and revision. What progress has the city made in attracting marine industries compatible with commercial fishing to provide new jobs for the existing fleet and maximize use of the waterfront property? And how do you envision future development of the harbor, considering all the pressures from the fishing, competition, the aging infrastructure, and the risks from climate change and ocean rise? So what progress have we made, and how do you envision moving forward with the harbor plan? Greg.
The harbor plan is currently with the state for a review. It'll get marked up. It'll come back to the city. That should be it may have already come in, but it's any day now. And then it will go back to the harbor planning committee to finalize, review, take votes, and then send back to the state for approval, which we're required to do. I was on the harbor planning committee in 2014. Now, as we discussed it the last time I was here during the preliminary, we own two parcels down to the waterfront. One is I-4C2, and the other one is on Commercial Street, which we had taken by tax title. I-4C2 has had a lot of talk since it was purchased. I fully supported our purchase of it when I was on the city council back in 2011 or so. Prior to that, it was overgrown, had an ugly chain link fence. It was an opportunity for us to get this thing out of the spite setting it was in, because the previous owner tried to get a mall back in the early 80s. People fought against it. So basically he says, forget it. And he just left it the way it was. So we bought it. It was made a parking lot as a temporary placeholder. And I said then, and I've said many times since, I didn't vote to buy a parking lot. It's not the best use for that spot, and it's not an allowable use in the designated port area, nor in the marine industrial zone. When we first bought it, we had outreach to the community. What are your ideas for this spot? And I think there were grants that went out to them for a couple $1,000 a piece to come up with these little models of what they wanted to do. Unfortunately, most of them wanted us to build it and fund it, and and a lot of them were pie in the sky things. Today, we're still sitting on a parking lot that is now over 10 years. I think it was a 5-year waiver. We got an additional 5-year waiver, and I think right now we're sort of in a don't ask, don't tell situation. I would like to see us reach out again. What are your ideas for this site? And it has to be, in my opinion, something that complies with the current zoning, DPA and the marine industrial. One thing that was proposed, I am on record multiple times saying I do not support, and that would be the a music venue. I think that's finally has been put to rest, and it's not going to happen there. It couldn't happen without us selling or leasing it to them. But again, it's got to be what are your ideas? We're not builders, we're not developers. We need to have ideas and see what works. Ultimately, what I'd like to see, though, is after hours, the parking is used for public use, whether it's the weekends or once the place that goes in there closes. We diversified. I mean, the fishing industry, as has been mentioned, is it's not dead. It's very different. It's a much different fleet from when I was a kid. We've diversified in terms of allowable uses, meaning bio. GMGI is an example. They had outreach to their colleagues down in Cambridge and other areas to see if they had an interest in coming in. There was definite interest, but it's a matter of where can they go. So outside the box thinking, think creatively. We can't just say, let's keep it a parking lot, let's not change anything. But we need to hear from some folks out there who actually have some money and a doable plan. We're not going to be coming in to subsidize some crazy plan.
Mary Ellen?
Well, I've talked to several of the property owners across the waterfront, and they all have ideas that they would love to have a voice to express. They're very frustrated with the limitations of what they've been able to do with their properties and the zoning of the marine industrial. And it's a challenge because, as Greg said, there is a very different industry on the waterfront than when I was a child. We had a flourishing fishing industry, and we have an interesting different industry right now using our waterfront. And I would like to see us continue to dive into marine opportunities. There's an article this week, I think, about, actually, I think it came up at the gala, all of these opportunities for marine industrial growth and all of these programs that are available. And we heard the same from Senator Tarr, who I admire greatly. And I would love to see some of that actually, all those opportunities actually come into fruition. The city has had plenty of time to develop those opportunities, which have evidently existed for a while, and yet our waterfront continues to fall into the harbor. So I'm curious as to what will come down the line. I think a big part of that will be asking our youth to see what do they foresee our waterfront for jobs-wise. There are jobs that are existing today that didn't even exist, weren't in the far reaches of the mind as recently as 20 years ago. So to wonder what we could do with our waterfront without knowing what is out there globally. I mean, there are lots of opportunities, I think, that haven't been explored, and I'm not sure why. And the state certainly seems to think there are plenty of opportunities, and they haven't moved on them, which, again, I don't know why. So I haven't been in office for 16 years or however long the city council members and the mayor has been around in Gloucester trying to solve these problems. I'm curious as to why nothing is moving. I would love to see that parking lot be used for something effective for the city, for our residents. And right now, we need parking. We're about to put in a 500-seat facility, or not seat because it's standing, but we're putting a big facility in downtown, and many spaces, as one store owner told me yesterday, are taken up by our police vehicles right now, because unfortunately their parking is being closed off. So, you walk around town, all you have to do is walk around town and talk to the businesses and ask them about their frustrations. You don't even have to bring up frustrations. Ask them about what it's like to run a business downtown Gloucester, and what is the best use of these lots, and what do we need? And parking comes up over and over and over again. So while it may not be the best use of that land, it's certainly serving an important use, as evidenced by the fact that it's constantly full.
Do either of you have a pet project that you would like to see? If you did not have to deal with all the rest of the community or actually getting the money or anything, do either of you have a vision for what you'd like to see there?
On that spot?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's interesting. I don't see a city use for it. I mean, I like our needs now are office space. We're in 2 rented areas for the school administration and for the at Pond Road for the city offices, special service, etc. But I would never want to put a office building on that spot. Again, I would like to see whatever happens there is a fit aesthetically and a fit for whatever their industry is. And as I said, take advantage of the parking after hours. I mean, if I had a magic wand, as far as city needs, I foresee too is not the fit for the city. Not a parking garage, not an office building.
But a viable private.
It's got to be a viable private thing. We got a $700,000 or $800,000 grant from the state when we bought it. We bonded the balance. It was $1.5 million total. And the vision was, as I said, take it out of the private hands because it's just overgrown and an eyesore and not being utilized to the best of its, for highest and best use. And here we are, I think 13, 14 years later, and it's still in the same condition. So there's a lot that we've been trying to do. This administration is new. We've only been here 22 months. And that is one of the things we've been talking about. But part of the holdup, at least since I've been mayor, is the completion of the harbor plan, the approval of the harbor plan. And we've actually, my fear, like many people's fear before I became mayor, is you spend money on a plan, you stick it on a shelf. But because we've been fortunate to have $23 million of ARPA relief money, we've allocated a nice chunk to implement the findings of the recommendations of the harbor plan. So we can actually see something happen instead of just more talk and then 10 years from now we'll do another harbor plan that doesn't have anything happen.
What are those recommendations of the harbor plan?
I'm waiting to see the final.
Well, you wrote it, did you not? Who wrote it?
The last harbor plan?
I guess. Yeah. I don't know.
Well,
whatever's at the State Department, whatever's at state right now.
One of the things that was big, which did happen, was removing some of the areas of East Gloucester out of the DPA. And that's hugely controversial because there are a lot of people who want the DPA there because what it was designed to do was to protect the industry. So us and New Bedford are two communities, fishing communities, that have DPAs. The distinction is we have, like I said, two parcels. So roughly 10% of our DPA is owned by the city, 90% privately. Flip it over to New Bedford, it's the opposite. So they get the best bang for the buck for what DPA had promised. It didn't really deliver so much for Gloucester. We were able to do that little relief out in East Gloucester. But I'm interested to see what the final recommendations for Harbor Plan 2023 are, because that's what really matters, is where we go from here, and having money to actually implement it is going to be helpful.
Well, that's what you're saying. So you've designated money to implement the plan. So I'm asking you, what are you implementing?
That's what I want to see what's finally approved.
Well, what did you ask for?
It was asked for before I got here. So
okay, so what was asked for? Do you know?
It's to look at the whole harbor and see what changes we can make incrementally.
So there's not really anything being implemented. This is just another discussion about what could possibly be done, right?
The discussion happened, the report is written, the report is with the state is going to comment and send it back to the city, and the city will vote, the Harbor Planning Committee will vote to accept it, send it to the city council, and then it will become our plan, and we have money to implement whatever the final recommendations are from them. Now, I'd like to know what your recommendations are, because,
well, I'm just asking. I'm just
Yeah.
asking because we're saying we're implementing. So what are we implementing? So I don't think that that's a far-fetched question. But yes, I saw. I don't have a hope and dream, a fantasy plan for it, but I did see a really interesting building effort. I don't know which country it was. If it was Finland or whatever, but they took a flood susceptible area, and they allowed parking underneath, which would obviously be the least. It was an interesting design. They had parking underneath, and then they had a grass surface over the top so that it became a recreational area. And the grass surface was actually on level with where the land would be. So in that particular lot, it would seem to be an interesting use where you would still have parking, and it would be community green space that could be used for farmers markets or the fishing industry to, I don't know, sell their wares right off of the boats. I would just love to see it used to the benefit of the community here, to a welcoming area for our tourists. If we were to be able to bring in, let's say, more cruise ships into Gloucester, it would be a wonderful welcoming area to bring the passengers in off of the cruise ships. Well, obviously with the tenders that bring the passengers in closer by. But we need sort of a central welcome to Gloucester area that's in the heart of downtown, that would encourage movement right up to Main Street. I think that would be it.
Okay. Moving a little bit off the coast, the fishing industry is concerned about the impact of large offshore wind farms disrupting the seafloor bed and fishing stocks. What should the city do to protect the ocean and fishing while creating a new source of renewable energy? Mary Ellen?
I would like to protect our waters from wind farms. I do not think they're aesthetically pleasing. They've yet to be proven as effective and long-standing and sustainable as they were told they would be, as evidenced by our windmill on the hill that has lost a blade and has consequently lost. They've taken the other 2 blades down, and we have no idea how long we'll sit and look at that pole. I think that wind energy has a lot of potential all through the Midwest. You can see wind farms, but they're a double-edged sword. There's, especially if you're putting it on the ocean floor, each windmill that is placed on the floor of the ocean takes up a city block of space, which you're displacing marine life. Not to mention the vibration from the windmill itself. We throw a lot of things out there as potential for energy, and we have to go through a trial process to see whether or not it'll work well. We have solar panels over in the annex that have not been operable for over a year. You build these things, you have to maintain them. And whether or not we have the expertise here locally to maintain them, before you jump into them, I think that you need to see what is viable. And I have not heard a lot of support for the windmills, and I certainly wouldn't like to see our offshore area covered in them. No.
And you're not getting a lot of support for them here either. I think what's proposed out there is, the way it was described to me, are these floating turbines, which will basically be anchored with chains down to the ocean floor. I don't see how the choppy North Atlantic is going to keep those things actually from toppling, but it's beyond my pay grade. We officially, the city, have not signed on to this. When I was in a North Shore group of mayors early on, when Kim Driscoll was the chair before she was the lieutenant governor, I made it very clear to her. I says, we're not in this right now. Gloucester is still, we have an industry here that's our 400-year heritage. We're not signing on to these windmills, these wind turbines. I meet monthly with our director of our fisheries commission, who is a full-time fisherman, and he mentioned that they're mapping out the best spots for the turbines, and not the fishing industry, the wind industry. And we're working through the fishing industry side, through our people, not at Gloucester, but globally, what are the best spots for fish? And the problem is they're sort of aligning. So if all of a sudden you've got these turbines in the best fishing areas, and for security reasons, you've got to have a stay away around those turbines, that really is going to disrupt our industry. I'm not feeling too sure that this is actually going to happen. We've had I think it was Cape Wind, or one of them, New Jersey, one of the wind turbine contractors basically took a multi-billion-dollar hit to back out of the contract. Mm-hmm. And I don't think things are moving along so swiftly down in Rhode Island. So I would not be surprised if this is either scaled back or just scrapped. But we need to be prepared. And it's one thing I've mentioned to Al Catone, he's our fisheries director, and to others, is if this is going to pass, we have to be ready that if it's going to happen in spite of our objection, we have to be ready to take what we can get for remediation funds. We fought the LNG for too long, basically, when it came time to give out the funds to sort of for your troubles. We didn't get a whole lot out of it. And now that's pretty much kaput too, the LNG terminals. So we have to be ready that if the powers that be and the contractors pull the trigger on this and put these in place, we should find some benefit that's going to offset the loss of prime fishing areas.
Okay. If you think about the thing that's the most ironic about these windmills is that the floating turbines that they're suggesting that would be anchored to the sea floor, which would absolutely interfere with sea life. And yet in Maine, they're requiring lobstermen to create an entirely different trap, and the lines that are attached from the trap to the buoy so that they don't interfere with the whales. I mean, and this is why I don't just buy into what the state and the federal government hands down to us as, these are options that you should take advantage of, and this is the newest technology that you should absolutely jump on board with, because there are trial periods, and it's not just in this country. They're trying it all over the world. And if you just pay attention to what's going on all over the world, you can see that some of these things are gigantic failures, and they're unfortunately bearing the brunt of that pilot attempt to see what will work. I think a wait and see is a good way to go with this.
Well, while we're still on the ocean, the city's Climate Action Resilience Plan was created with a lot of community input. Could you please mention at least 3 specific goals of the plan and explain how you would help the citizens of Gloucester continue to implement them? So I'll start with Mary Ellen.
I cannot name three. Again, coming into this cold is a huge learning curve, and I have done my level best to try and learn everything. So had I had these questions ahead of time, I would certainly have an answer for you. With the climate control, it is interesting our efforts that we are making to hold back the ocean and sea level rise. A webinar that I was on, I think it was 3 weeks ago, in which our local experts that were addressing, they had increased the flood zone and some of the initiatives that we had undertaken in this city to offset the potential increasing sea levels. There was a professor from Northeastern University who basically said that there is nothing we can do, and that we're essentially having to move people inland, and not just people, but communities inland is about the only thing that we can do to prevent mass destruction from sea level rises as they are predicted to come about. So Gloucester being on the water, Salem being, all of these communities on the water, which she pointed out, she said they would all be gone, and they would all have to be, if we were going to truly prepare for the sea level rise, we would have to move everybody halfway into Massachusetts. And her exasperation during that webinar was fascinating to watch, because this is something that she studies and she's an expert on, and yet she pretty much, every opportunity that our local person gave to, isn't there something else we could do? She said, no, absolutely not. And so the fact that we passed this, we increased our flood zone, and Greg will, I'm sure, know exactly the details on this. What it essentially did was put homes that are existing on a floodplain, which increases their insurance costs significantly, or deems part of their homes they can't build in those areas anymore. So I don't know, climate change is very real in the fact that we are having significant changes to our environment. What is causing it? There's so many reasons, and it's not my expertise, but I do think we need to address it. But we are not going to hold back the ocean from its increase on Gloucester. I can tell you one thing we shouldn't be doing is we shouldn't be building on our marshlands, which we seem to have had no problem doing, and we shouldn't be continuing to give people opportunities to build on the water, which we continue to do, if we're so concerned about it. We're in this sort of catch-22 where I'm very concerned about the environment, but I'm building all of these facilities who are huge energy usage, and we leave the lights on 24/7, but we're really concerned about the environment. But we are creating green facilities that need green buses, so which means we're going to dump all of our gas buses in exchange for green buses. I mean, there's a lot of utilization and waste and recreation, when if we were truly climate conscious, we would use what we have and figure out better ways to address development. I mean, every time we develop something, we are sucking resources out of this environment.
Okay, Greg, back to some specifics of the plan.
Yeah, sure. So let's just talk about buses. So the school buses are leased, and so the time is when it's time to renew the lease to switch over to hybrid or electrification. So that settles that one. Mother Nature is going to win. There's no question. You look at the models over the next 100 years, Florida's gone. So if you want to get some waterfront property in Georgia, you might want to, or Arkansas, you might want to think about that now. But Gloucester and a lot of the Massachusetts coast are also at risk. We have hired a sustainability coordinator who keeps an eye on all things sustainability and reliance for the city. the city has taken steps before I got here. It was completed while I was mayor, but the barrier at the high school and the barrier at the sewage treatment plant. Again, it's only buying time. It's not going to stop global climate change. We can do what we can here to make ourselves more resilient. We can do things to lower the city's carbon footprint. As I mentioned in our last chat during the preliminary, it's more what's going to happen at the federal level and what's going to happen at the international level. We can't control what's being spewed out of coal-fired plants in India and other places, or even to oil or other natural gas facilities here. What we can do is act locally, and that's taking the steps of having the sustainability coordinator, who has more than paid for her position in the, I guess, 11 months she's been on the job, and taking the steps that we can to literally hold back the tide. Again, Mother Nature will win, but we have to do what we can today. And it does come with zoning changes that keep in mind, have that recognition of what's the likelihood that house might find itself underwater. You know, that's why certain areas have to build up on stilts before they can have their first floor. Have parking underneath. So that's another thing we can agree on, is that in the end, the ocean is going to win this battle. But we're not in a position to start buying up properties and moving them inland. And, you know, I would think that the homeowners who are in these areas are thinking ahead. I mean, some of them have been there for generations, and they've been watching. I was at a friend's house this weekend, and he pointed out, he's right on the river off of Thurston Point Road, and he pointed out how in the 30 years he's been there, the tide is getting higher and higher. So it is a terrible situation that we're in here in Gloucester, here in Massachusetts, here in the U.S. But unfortunately, for many years, those people who are in positions to make a difference kept saying it was fake. There is no such thing as climate change. Whether you agree, whether you think it was made by a higher power or it was made by, exhaust pipes spewed into the atmosphere, it is here. It's undeniable, and we have to take steps now, and we're trying to play catch up after decades of being ignored.
Okay, here's a new question. While the majority of Gloucester's residents are white, census and school data show that the number of non-English speaking immigrants and other minority residents continues to grow. 2 parts. What have you done to educate yourself about the history of discrimination and how it still affects Gloucester? And secondly, how do you intend to connect with residents of different demographic groups to ensure that their voices are heard? Start with Greg.
Well, one thing that's been done, and I'm proud of it, I can't take credit for it, but the Gloucester 400th has been doing the land acknowledgement, acknowledging the Native Americans and the African Americans who were brought here against their will. And so it's a matter of being clear that Gloucester is a welcoming place. And, some people aren't so welcoming. But when my grandparents came here, my great-grandparents from the Azores on my mother's side and my father's parents, my grandparents on the Sicilian side, they weren't necessarily welcomed with open arms. And I think that we've come a long way. And it's the younger people who seem to be much more open-minded about diversity and differences that people have. And we could learn from them. I have no answer about how to make people be nice. But as far as it goes at the city level, we have every volunteer on a border commission, we make them acknowledge they've read and they'll abide by the civility resolution. We make sure that our employees understand what our expectations are. So I would hope that America becomes a more understanding place and recognizes that the melting pot is literally becoming a melting pot in terms of people. In the next, 50 years, whites will be the minority party. I mean, nationality, or what I'm saying. So we have to just start realizing that we are the same. Once you slice people open, to be so graphic, but from the inside, we're one person. We're one people, and I can't say anything more than let's just try to get along, and let's just make sure that we have our expectations for our employees. We have zero tolerance in our schools, and that there's a brighter future ahead.
Mary Ellen?
I think that there's always been this misconception that we're a melting pot, when in fact we're a salad bowl, and we always have been. Communities adapt and congregate together because those are where they're most comfortable. I think that the more we label people and identify those labels and create anything according to those labels, the more divided we become. We are all residents of Gloucester. We all are in the same place. We need to treat one another alike with kindness and with civility. And the label should make a difference. I could not be more against labeling anything for anyone. I do think that with our non-English speaking population increasing, we do need more language resources than we have. We have children coming into our school systems that need help, that will need to be, I just learned this week, which was horribly disturbing, that children coming into the school systems that are not English speaking are not tested for 2 years with regard to learning disabilities. I'm hoping that that is not true, because we need to help these kids to thrive. And one of the ways they learn to thrive is to understand the language. If we don't have support for them to learn the language, I think that we're starting off on the wrong foot. And with regard to that, there was a situation that happened at my sister's home where a non-English speaking woman who was an Amazon truck driver came into my sister's driveway and drove her car basically on the precipice of her driveway, which is just sort of a cliff. And my brother-in-law came home. They were not speaking the same language, and my sister was thankfully close behind, and she pulled out Google Translate, and we were able to find out that she was pregnant and she couldn't take her foot off the brake, and she was scared. And so we're able to resolve the situation, but only through Google Translate. And it was very frustrating to find out afterwards that we do actually have 911 translation capabilities calling into our police department. So I think educating ourselves as to what options are around to help one another and to be supportive of one another, whether we speak English or not, is critical. It's critical to community. We've had the Italian community knows, the Portuguese community knows. Everyone has come into this city at some point or another as a newcomer, and we just need to welcome.
All right. Shall I move on to the next question?
Sure.
Despite Gloucester's groundbreaking program to address opioid addiction, we continue to have tragic deaths by overdosing. What will you do as mayor to deal with this problem and support victims of the crisis, both drug users and their families, as they deal with a multidimensional problem? So, Mary Ellen?
Yeah, this is a topic near and dear to my heart. As the director of the health department, I dealt with it directly, as well as all of my work in the federal government. So we throw money at a problem and we don't track where that money is going or what the impact is. You will never be able to solve a problem without having the data as to its outcome. We tend to forget that substance abuse is first and foremost a behavior that we have yet to get to the bottom of what starts it. A lot of our addiction arose out of, as the fishermen will tell you, prescribed drugs who then you run out of your prescription and then you have to find an alternative. It's a plague that is affecting not only this country but the world, and one that needs to be addressed specifically. I'm very proud of my sister, who is launching a program for the families of substance users to help them cope with the stressors of having a family member struggling with substance abuse. We are getting more settlement money. It was just talked about yesterday in the paper, and they can continue to throw money at solving this issue. But I think until we get to the heart of why the drugs are solving a problem temporarily to the person, and how can we stem the flow of drugs into this country, I'm afraid that we will continue to struggle and lose lives. We need alternatives. People, when they get clean, they need to have a place to go and an occupation for their hands and their lives to keep their minds and bodies busy so that they don't revert back to addiction. And I don't think we pay enough attention to that. We need more recovery facilities, recovery options, those that are already clean, what can they do now? That's where we should be concentrating. I know that we have harm reduction efforts, which are somewhat important, but the effort that I think really needs to be expended is what do we do once they are clean, and how can we help them stay clean?
Greg?
Yeah, I would agree that the major problem is, well, it's twofold. One is the illegal drugs coming in, and the second one is the overprescription. We've all seen the movies with Michael Keaton and how they were overprescribed basically to make a lot of money, and it created a whole new generation of addicts. So that's more at the state and the federal government as far as trying to stop that flow. Locally, we have our community impact unit, which is reaching out to people who need it as they need it. We have the One Stop program that will hopefully they've applied for an opera grant. We'd like to help them out. So they have they help out with people they've got their Narcan boxes all over town, which is kind of too late at that point, but it's a chance to save somebody who's having an overdose. We've got the Action program. We have reached out to the hospital. There was the Discover program at the hospital, which was very popular prior to COVID, where people who were in recovery could go in and talk to each other, and it was a very supportive program. Because of funding, because of COVID, because of staffing, the hospital has eliminated it. We met with the president of the hospital recently and got a commitment that if they're able to find the staffing, they will bring that program back. We have the peer recovery organization down on Parker Street. So it's a matter of going with the partners and trying to get them to do what they have the expertise in. And we do have this opioid settlement money that we can use to help fund some of these activities for prevention, for trying to help people stay off it, and just trying to help point them in a new direction that will make them feel more fulfilled in life, and they may not have to turn to illegal drugs. So it's a multifaceted effort to do this, but the city's role is to do what we can, unfortunately, with people who are already in the situation and working with our partners to stop the flow of drugs coming in. There's just too many people making a lot of money off importing illegal drugs, distributing illegal drugs, and then in many cases, medical professionals who are getting people hooked for a profit margin.
I do want to say one other thing too. There's a shout out to the CORE program, which is a phenomenal program here in Gloucester for recovery services, and they have made fantastic strides with population. However, we have drug use in plain sight all over this city, and I find that hard to accept when we have an exceptional police force. One of the areas that are known drug use areas are right across the street from the police station. And I would like to see more effort made and I know our detectives and our with the police force are incredibly effective at what they do. I remember when we were doing the drug take back day with the health department, I got a little bit of an inside scoop as to the drug use in this city. But I think having a wet shelter in our city is not effective and it's not helpful. I would like to see that turned into a dry shelter so that we don't have to have that opportunity at our doorstep, especially knowing full well, evidently it's public knowledge that we get people from out of town brought down to us because we're the most lenient and helpful of the North Shore for our addictive population. I don't think that serves any of us well.
Okay. There have been quite a few debates and interviews during this campaign season. Name one question that you believe is of great importance to the voters, but has not been asked. What have we missed in all this discussion and lead up to the election? Greg?
Oh, yeah, that's a tough one. A question that has not been asked. I'd say maybe more environmental questions. You know, they've been asked out on social media and face to face, but not necessarily in a debate. You know, what can we do to protect the open spaces? And I think that since I've been mayor, we have not lost any open spaces. We've actually increased open spaces. One question is, which will be part of the conversation as we move forward. The Open Space Committee is meeting next week, or maybe this week. Check the city's website to talk about the future of the East Gloucester school site. So that should be part of the discussion about what is what do we see for this opportunity for multiple acres for open space? Again, it's like, what's our vision for the open spaces? The existing ones, improving those, and possibly expanding. And we're luckily going to be able to do that with the East Gloucester site. So I would say that's kind of, one of the big ones that hasn't been directly asked in a debate.
Mary Ellen?
I'd like to see a question about the health and safety and the health, safety, and recreation opportunities that are no longer available in the city, and what are we going to do to improve those opportunities? In my lifetime here in Gloucester, I've watched green space disappear and fields disappear and opportunities for recreation disappear, and the emphasis on healthy outdoor activity not be a part of the focus of anything. So I would like to see questions around that. I'd also like to see some questions around what has been accomplished, what was accomplished before this political season started, before this campaign started, before I entered this race. I am really impressed with everything that's been done in the past 5 months of this campaign. I'm just curious as to the activity and the morale issues of the city and the accomplishments that occurred before then.
Okay, I'm going to give you each 30 seconds to a minute to make a final statement and mention 2 but no more good reasons why someone should vote for you. Mary Ellen?
So I prepared a 2-minute statement, so clearly I won't be reading that. But I would like to say that 2 reasons for electing me. 1, I am not a politician. I am not beholden to anybody, anywhere, and I have no other interest other than to see the residents of Gloucester thrive in this city. I am here to serve you. My biggest want is to give you your voice back and to open the doors of communication so that you will actually know what's going on, where your money is being spent, where our funds are being used, every penny of them, and not in general terms, but in specific terms. And I just want you to know that I am an open book, and I am here to answer your questions, and will always have an open door policy, and hope you will vote for me, knowing that you will get an entirely different direction of the way things have been going in the past few years. Thank you.
And Greg?
Well, I'm running for election because I think that the future of our city is on the line. Decisions that are made at City Hall have a real impact on real people all over our city. You can't run a city on generalizations and speculation, and you can't run a city on conviction without substance. Since taking office, let's see, and this isn't since 5 months ago, this is going back from day one, I've increased the annual road and pothole repair budget by nearly 500%, invested $2.7 million additional to our school system, launched a beach parking reservation system that has virtually eliminated gridlock. I've spearheaded the ordinance to make city parking free for veterans. I've implemented new accountability and efficiency standards at City Hall, and this is all while maintaining our city's AA bond rating. So I ask for your support for another 2 years. The first 22 months have been a whirlwind. I think we've accomplished a lot. We picked up the ball that got left for us by the previous administration, got those projects through. We dealt with the day-to-day craziness, a manhole cover explosion on Dale Ave, a wind turbine blade falling, a 20-inch water main breaking, and a fire at City Hall, as well as forest fires. But we started moving forward with things like the Comprehensive Planning Initiative, which is going to be key for our future for the next 10 years and beyond. So I'm asking for your vote. Help us keep the foot on the gas. I really would like you to turn out on November 7th and give me your vote for mayor. If you need more information, call me. Go to voteverga.com. And remember on November 7th to vote Verga.
On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Cape Ann, I want to thank Mayor Greg Verga and his challenger, Public Health Specialist Mary Ellen Rose, for agreeing to participate in this forum, and 1623 Studios for providing these public service programs. Please remember to vote in the city election on November 7th.